I'm Kim, it's October, therefore it is the season of horror books. So of course this is going to be a video where I read a bunch of horror books. I'm kind of taking a bit of a laid back approach to this one. I started a new job last month. I've been really busy. I've either been not reading a lot or I've been just reading really casually. And so originally I was like, yeah, 2 videos a month all throughout the year, that was my plan, but I just kind of don't really think that's feasible for the rest of the year. The doorbell just went and I've completely forgot what I was saying. Something about reading casually. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what editing me puts together. Anyway, I'm taking this one casually because I was like, there's a couple of new horror releases. I want to read them. I don't really want to put myself on a set TBR, but there are books I want to read and it's that time of year, so any horror releases that kind of come into my grasp I'm thinking about reading. And to be honest, it is day 10 of October today, and I hadn't even bothered picking up a horror book yet, and in part that was because I was reading other things, but also because today this got delivered. The Works of Vermin by Ciarán Ennis. I read Leech last year, yeah, beginning of 2024. It was kind of one of the books, or was it 2023? When did it come out? I feel like it was 2023 actually, I take that back. Beginning of 2023, I think. It was one of the books that kind of got me back into reading. I feel like it's 2024. I don't know. I'll put it on the screen here. Either way, I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars and I kind of was curious to see what else Ciarán Ennis would put out. I saw a couple of months ago that they were releasing a new book and it seems like it could be interesting to me. There are some giant centipedes in here. The main character is an exterminator. That's pretty much all I know. Something's probably suspicious is going on. So I'm excited to pick this up. This is going to be the first book I read for this video probably. I do have a couple of other books. Like I said, this is not like I'm reading 6 books in this video, although I think I probably have that many books on my shelf somewhere that I could read. But there are a couple of new-ish releases that I'm like, I want to try out at least and try and read them. One of those is You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. I have read all of Andrew Joseph White's YA books and I knew that I wanted to pick up this when it was released because I do think that although I think that each YA book has gotten better as it's been released, I am looking forward to see what adult books that Andrew Joseph White puts out. This is meant to be gross. It's meant to be about bugs, and unintentionally I've kind of gone for a double bug theme in this video. That's pretty much all I know. The main character is Crane, there's aliens, there's a pregnancy. We'll see. It's fairly short actually. It's only it's just over 300 pages, so I'm hoping I can get through this one too. And then finally there is this book which I haven't seen about anywhere, literally pure chance I think I saw it at all, but it's called The Country Under Heaven by Frederick S. Durbin, and it's a kind of weird west book where it's set in the western cowboy time, but there is tentacles and some sort of cosmic horror thing going on. And Weird West is one of those genres where I really just enjoy it. You don't see it too much, you see it more in like the TTRPG space, but it's one of those things where I just think it's the perfect combination of like western cowboy vibes and then also eldritch unknown horrors. I just think that it's a perfect combination personally, and so I want to pick this one up as well because I've had this since it released, which I think was maybe May, and I was just kind of not really planning on picking it up anytime soon, and so I think this one is going to be an interesting read too. Apart from that, I don't know what I'm reading. If I'm even reading anything else, maybe I'll just read 3 books in this video. I'm kind of, like I said, taking it easy. I am definitely getting back into the swing of reading things. I have actually read 4 books this month now, 4 or 3, I don't even remember. I've read a bunch of books this month so far that are just completely unrelated to videos, and I think that earlier on this year I was being so focused on reading books related to videos, and I've kind of gone back and reversed that towards the end part of this year where I'm reading a little bit more for myself again instead of making everything I'm reading into a video. Life lessons learned in your first year on YouTube or whatever. So yeah, that's my plan. I'll update you once I start reading, and we'll see what happens in this video. Hi, it has been 3 days and I am 79 pages in, which is not very far at all. You can kind of just see how much progress I've made. It is a very big book. It is also a little bit dense. I'm not giving up on it because number one, I don't want to. If I didn't know this was coming out at the beginning of the year, I would have said it's probably on one of my most anticipated books I want to read. And I know that I did really enjoy Leech, and the premise that we've got so far has been really interesting. It's just that it is quite flowery, especially in the beginning with the initial setup. So we have our main character named Guy, and we have another main character called Asta. Guy and Asta live on what is essentially a giant tree that has these different roots that go down, and Guy is an exterminator. He goes down and he kills pests, essentially. He has a run-in in the very first chapter with something kind of strange that we see as a theme that's kind of starting to crop up. And then we have Asta, who's a perfumer and makes these scents specifically for this Chancellor, I think. And so she gives a special scent to give him the power to walk through crowds and things like that. Or that's one of the skills that she has, which is a really interesting skill. And at this point, they're separate, like they haven't interacted, but eventually their paths are obviously going to come together. And we are starting to see that obviously something is going on. Something with Asta, she has this really bad cough, and there is something up with that. And then Guy with this interaction with this big creature that he has had. Like I said, the language, especially in the first section where it's really much set in the scene, is so descriptive to the point where it takes a moment to actually kind of understand what is being said. I'll try and find an example, but yeah, so for example, Tillard, known as the deathbed of tulips, straddles the river gorge like a half-submerged stump. It's a grand bridge of a city, a mesa yawning over a silver tongue of water, underside tangled with 1,000 gargantuan roots. From afar, it appears to teeter on its many twisted legs, precarious as a mirage, yet as travellers approach, perhaps by horse or riverboat, the city resolves into solidity. The mist clear, the writhing roots fall still, and the fissures of petrified bark open to reveal vertical glens, streaks of wildflowers blooming red under the full moon and white under the knee. And it just keeps going on, and that's the first page, and that's like half of the first page. Now that we have more character interaction, there is, I mean, it's still there, but it's slightly less because we're getting a lot more dialogue and a lot more character stuff. That first chapter especially is really setting the scene, and it was one of those things where I had to sit there and really focus on what I was reading to make sure that the information was going in. And even at first I don't think I realised that they essentially lived in this giant tree stump, which is really cool, but the language kind of is a bit overbearing in that way that I think sometimes it makes it hard to actually see what's being said. Like I said, I'm not giving up on it. I want to read it and I'm really curious to see how it goes. When a book first comes out, it tends to be that it gets quite positive reviews and then the reviews start to dip as more people read it, but it does seem to have fairly positive reviews so far, and so I'm really interested to see how things come about. I'm just gonna have to slowly make my way through it, I think, and take my time and see what it is that happens. I am hoping to kind of maybe get at least a third of the way through, because plot-wise, like I said, not much has happened in the sense that there are things that are going on for both Asta and Guy, but not enough that links them together or that is really given into the big reveal of what kind of thing is happening in the underbelly of Tillard. But I'm looking forward to finding out. Hello, you'll have to forgive the angle. I'm in a hotel room for my friend's wedding tomorrow, and so I thought we would do a quick update since it's the first time I'm alone in a few days about what I've been reading lately. So I did get just under 50% of the way through the works of Vermin, and we are moving. It's still really slow. They've got to the point now where they are working to try and identify what this strange new beast is, and there's a kind of other kind of seedy plot that has kind of started to crop up, and so I am going to finish it. I do think it is really slow paced though, and I haven't picked it up basically all week. I read maybe, I think, about 100 pages after, maybe 150 after I last filmed my update. I brought it with me, so if I do get to read at any point over the next few days, then I'm going to prioritise that one. But yeah, so I have read a little bit, and that's where I'm at with that. We do have a surprise contender for this video because my library hold for The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica came in, and I've heard really mixed things about it. It was on my 25 and 2025, and it seemed like loads of people weren't super keen on it, and so I decided to get it from the library as opposed to buying it physically, especially because I think the UK cover is kind of ugly as well compared to the US one. And so I ended up coming through earlier this week, and I just thought I would slowly make my way through it because it's really short. It's a novella. It's about 190 something pages on Libby. And so we have our main character, who is a member of this sacred sisterhood, very much comped to the Starving Saints, like between the two of them, and also Mia that I read earlier this year. The three of them are very, very similar books. I would argue that The Starving Saints is more fantastical, whereas Mia and The Unworthy are more similar in terms of the I guess, the kind of literary practical aspects of what goes on, but I would say that The Unworthy is more horror, like more overt horror, whereas Mia is more folk horror, I would say. And we basically see this cult essentially, and there is a new person who arrives, and the kind of things that have gone on. There is some background stuff about kind of climate disasters that's going on, but we don't really see too much of that. There are a couple of flashback moments because our main character is writing down secretly. She can't get caught, the fact that she's writing down basically her history, because they're given like new names when they get to this place. I think I'm giving it a 3.5. I ended up finishing it this morning. It did read fairly quickly, it was fairly easy to read, and I think that there was a good build as it went through. I do think the end happened kind of quick, and I think it was a little bit sudden, but I didn't think it was terrible. I read Tender as a Flesh a while back, and I think I gave it 2 stars actually. I wasn't that keen on it. I think I preferred this one to Tender as a Flesh, which I think is a controversial opinion because a lot of people seem to prefer Tender as a Flesh to The Unworthy. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that. I haven't read anything else, so I don't have anything else to update on. And I don't know how much reading I'm going to get done this weekend at least, because I mean, I might do a little bit of reading tonight. And then obviously tomorrow I'll be watching my friends get married, so I won't be reading then. And then I've got some time on the weekend before I head home, so I might be able to get a bit more reading done. We shall see. I did bring the Frederick Durbin book as well, because I was really apparently optimistic that I was going to finish The Works of Vermin, but I think my goal this weekend is to try and finish The Works of Vermin, and then we'll just go from there. So that is my update. I will see you later. Welcome back to the kitchen cupboard. I'm here to update you because I finished The Works of Vermin, not last night, the night before. It was on the weekend, but I didn't get a chance to update yesterday. I am really conflicted about this book. On one hand, super interesting world building, truly one of the most unique world building stories that I've read this year, and in that sense I would 100% recommend it because I think that it is so unique. They live on this tree root, there is this big collection of pests and stuff that they need to track down and hunt, but on the other hand it is very slow paced, and especially in the beginning we are flicking between these 2 perspectives, and we're learning different elements of this world, and it's very character driven. But it isn't until that probably final 100 pages that we get a bit of a plot twist, and from that point on the action kind of goes forward quite quickly. And I do think that the final 100 or so pages was really strong. I did really like that. I thought the twist was good. I thought that it was resolved fairly well, and so in that sense I did like the book, and I'm glad that I did stick through it. I stuck through it because I really like Leach. I thought this was a really unique book, and I really wanted to see what the payoff was going to be, and I do think that the payoff was there, but I think that the first chunk of the book was a bit difficult to get through, and I don't know if it's because it was so overly descriptive at times, or because it was so character driven and there was somehow so much about the world and yet there was not enough about the world. We have this manual of all of these pests and bugs, and Guy often is going through and is kind of obsessing over it, but it would have been maybe really nice to see other books from the past, and they kind of really briefly get a mention. Like the extermination element is his day-to-day job, and yet for the most part we're not seeing a lot of that apart from with this big kind of one incident. I do recommend it. I think that if you're looking for a really unique book that does have horror elements, but is very fantastical horror, I should probably say this is way more a fantasy horror than it is just a horror. I really do think that it'd probably be worth it picking up. I'm sorry about this awful light. Where can I move? Because I do think it was really interesting, and again, like, I do think that the world building in this book is the one thing that does stick out to me. Like, it is so unique, and I was thinking that the difference between Leach and this one is that Leach was so contained. Leach took place in this really isolated place. There was maybe a handful of cast of characters. We had the people that were in the big house, and you only had a couple of other people outside of that, whereas this is so vast. We have different people we're engaging with all the time. We have our main characters, but there are other characters dotted around that we keep going back to, and I think that meant it was a bit easier to get lost in that sense. It was good. It's a 3.5. The 0.5 is because the ending, I think, like I said, with the payoff. I gave Leech a 4, and I think if the ending of the Works of Vermin hadn't gone the way it had, it probably would have been a 3, but I do think the ending was good. I liked the way that it went, and I felt like the build-up, it's one of those books where if you went back and reread it, the build-up would make even more of a difference, but I don't think that I was engaged enough for the first part of the book for me to want to go back and reread it. So I'm settling on a 3.5. Maybe read it, I don't know if it sounds like it's for you. I think if you're interested in the world building and the overly descriptive language isn't a massive turn off for you, and that you don't mind like really character driven books that will eventually lead to that payoff, give it a go. But I think just be forewarned that that is what it's like going into it. My next update is that I did start The Country Under Heaven by Frederick Durbin last night, and I'm quite liking that so far. It was this, so the main character's name's Ovid Vesper. He fought in the American Civil War, and he pretty much died for like a very short period of time, and after that he started having these visions and seeing these strange creatures that are just otherworldly. And so we're kind of following him in various different points of time, where kind of supernatural things are going on. And I will, afterwards, when I have the book, because I'm about to eat my breakfast, read the back of the blurb. It's quite a nice description of what it is that Ovid Vesper is going to be doing. I think it's going to be more of like an episodic story, with maybe kind of like one overarching sort of thing. But the writing's really easy to read. It does kind of feel old-timey because he's a cowboy, and just the way that it's written feels very cowboy-esque. It feels very Western. It feels very like it is in the 1800s. And so I think it's going to be fairly easy for me to get through. I got through, I think, just under 80 pages last night, so I'm going to try and make some more progress on that today. I'm editing, and I thought I would just read the blurb of The Country Under Heaven before I forgot. So it talks about how he was a Civil War former Union soldier. He suffers from paralysing visions he's been having since he survived one of the war's most gruesome battles, the Battle of Antietam. He travels across the western frontier, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say, nonetheless, Ovid brings his steady and calm compassion as he helps the people of a broken country, rapidly changing, but like himself, still reeling and wounded from the war. He assists with matters of all sorts, from odd jobs around the house, to guiding children back to their own universe, to hunting down unnatural creatures that stalk the night, all while seeking his own personal resolution and peace from his visions. And I just thought that was a really actually good summary of what I've read so far, at least, because it is very episodic. So far there has been two kind of like, the chapters are quite long, and within the chapters themselves there is like one kind of significant incident that happens that kind of links to this mysterious creatures that he does have run-ins with, and it's kind of interspersed with smaller moments, which I think is a good way of telling a story like this, because for having cosmic horror, it is hard to describe things. So the kind of best way to show it, in a sense, is to have lots of different moments where you're engaging with these cosmic horror elements, without overly showing too much of them, but showing the different, I guess, the vast differences between each of the different experiences, if that makes sense. The only way I can think to describe it is obviously with like Lovecraft, because it is described as Lovecraftian. There is a lot of different stories with a lot of different cosmic horrors, and the focus is more on the people and the community and things like that. And I do think in the kind of short stories we're getting within this, even though it's all one story following one main character, it's very sporadic moments in his life as the years go on, where he is encountering these creatures. And so I think that probably is a good way to do it without being too overly descriptive on what it means when he's coming face to face with these cosmic horrors. So yes, there's that. In the kitchen once again to give you an update. I did finish The Country Under Heaven by Frederick Durbin. I'm giving it 4 stars. I thought it was a fairly enjoyable read. It is very episodic and very snapshot of all of these tales with all of these cosmic horror-esque things in it, except, is it cosmic horror? Like the cover, I think, makes it, the cover is one of the things that drew me into it. I think the cover is I don't actually think the cover is a massively accurate representation of what goes on in the book. It almost doesn't even really feel like a horror. It is quite I want to say hopeful. A lot of the bad things that happen to bad people, and so you have like a lot of conversations about Indigenous people, about race, because of the time period it is. It's the late 1800s, post the abolition of slavery in America, and so you're looking at how Ovid is engaging with these people who are taking advantage of people of colour, of Indigenous people, of women, and he is anti all of that. And so he is very much like a good guy amongst all of these bad people, which I appreciate, because I think it is good to see a Western story that features a good cowboy, if that makes sense. He doesn't have those sorts of values, but I do think that the horror itself, like the horror was the real horrors, that is the horror of the eldritch cosmic things that are going on, but that feels kind of small in comparison. And because we're going through each of these stories and we're facing different kind of creatures and understanding different things about the cosmicness about this, it isn't super intense. I did like the ending. I thought it kind of rounded off the story nicely, and I would recommend it, but it definitely, don't go into it expecting it to be super cosmic horror-y, because it isn't really. My next book and my final book for this video will be You Were Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. Kind of funnily, I've left probably the most horror book till the end, and it is the 30th of October today, so the day before Halloween. I'm hoping to kind of read it all tonight. I'm on my lunch break right now, and so I'm going to do a little bit of reading now, and I'll let you know. First line of the first chapter is literally just one sentence, and then it moves on to chapter 2, and it says like Crane was already 3 months pregnant, and I'm like, that's it. And then we move straight into a bit of an explicit scene. So I'm going to read a little bit more of that, and I'll let you know how I feel about it in a little bit. I forget how quickly it goes dark in winter, now that the clocks have gone back. Spring forward, fall back, that's what I was going to say. So I was like, I'm going to have plenty of time to finish it, to film this update after work, and it's dark, and so we're back to fuzzy quality front camera view, because I don't want to do what I did 700 times at the beginning of the year, where I film on the back camera but then accidentally not film myself. So all of that is to say, I did finish You Were Meant to Be Human. I am giving it 4 stars. I quite liked it. I have to preface this by saying trigger warning for a lot of things. Pregnancy, obviously, abuse in a relationship, including some non-consensual sex. There is a hive of aliens, and so if that any of that squeaks you out, just a warning. And also there is one moment at the end, which I'll go into in a minute, so a level of violence and gore, so be warned before you go into it. When I started reading, I thought that the thing that I was thinking about the most is that it felt like such a comparison to Hell Followed With Us, because we're following 2 trans boys, or trans young men in this book, who are in a dystopian situation. In Hell Followed With Us, it is like an entire world sort of thing, whereas in this one it is it's a cult. It's a very small scale cult in that sense, but the level of kind of gruesomeness kind of felt really similar, and I do think that Crane felt quite similar to Benji in that sense, except that, you know, there's probably like 5-6 years between them. I will say that like Crane still reads quite young, but he is in his early 20s, and so I feel like that is fair, but I do think that the writing in this one has continued to improve. Like all of the books, in my opinion, have gotten better writing wise as the publishing order has gone on, and I do think that continues in this one. I think there is that kind of moment at the end that I was talking about that is the only real thing that I think, or the main thing at least, that is kind of there for more shock value than anything, because I read it and I had to kind of reread what I was reading, and I was thinking, what? And that in itself was kind of a bit like of a question mark for me as to why, but yeah, I think other than that it can get pretty gruesome. There is quite a bit of explicit content in here, sexually, and there's obviously a big conversation as well to do with bodies and what it's like to not have control of your own body because of legislation, because there is commentary in the background about the legislation that's going on in America versus the Hive, which works very similar to that. Yeah. What else was I going to say? There was something else I was going to say. Oh, the world building itself. So the world building feels quite vague. Like we have, and I think this kind of goes back to what I have thought in other Andrew Joseph White books, where there is, I mean, they feel very character centric in the sense I think the characters are stronger than the world building. The Hive in this feels like it was kind of just fake. Like we encounter it a few times, we kind of see it kind of lurking in the background, but that element of the plot I think was a bit weaker compared to the characters, who felt a little bit more defined. But either way, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I kind of had seen some reviews about obviously people talking about the kind of the gore elements of it, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. I gave it 4 stars. I'm glad to have read it as well because I was looking forward to reading Andrew Joseph White's adult fiction as opposed to his YA, even though I have enjoyed his YA, and I hope that we do get more adult fiction from him, because I can see myself continuing to pick them up. That brings me to the end of this video, and it is October 30th, which means I will get this up and ready for Halloween. I hope you've enjoyed this and you've maybe seen some books in here from 2025 that maybe are interesting to you. I did actually go on a bit of a book haul the other day when I was visiting my friends when they were getting married, and I picked up Blood as Bright as the Moon, Blood as Bright as the Moon, and I also picked up The Possession of Alba Diaz. I have read The Hacienda. I read it earlier this year. I actually own Vampires of El Norte and I pre-ordered it actually, and so I have been meaning to pick that up, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit recently that I would like to pick that up soon. So I'm going to read that before I read The Possession of Alba Diaz. But these are 2 other 2025 releases that I'm looking forward to, and I hope you have a very horrific Halloween, or not, a very tame one alternatively. It's up to you. See you later.